All right, so we're outside the Richland County Courthouse here in downtown Columbia, South Carolina, where earlier today, former Chief Justice Jean Toll decisively shot down convicted killer Alec Murdaugh's bid for a new trial. I'm here with our research director, Jen Wood, who's been following this story from the very beginning, was with me in Walterboro for the whole 6 weeks of the original Murdaugh double homicide trial, was with me all day today here in Richland County. Jen, first of all, let me ask you, were you surprised by Justice Toll's decision?
You know, somebody asked me when we were in the time period before she came out and ruled from the bench what I thought, and I kind of thought she was going to grant him a new trial, but I wasn't surprised when she didn't. So, I thought the defense's case was very strong, but looking at the standards that she set and she was using from State versus Green, I shouldn't have been surprised. So,
yeah, it was a roller coaster day. Obviously, let's go back. The first part of the day, we heard from Juror Z, is the term we're going to use. They were all given letters this time to replace the numbers that they were assigned during the trial, but Juror Z testified to exactly what the standard is for a new trial. Yes, there was contact from Clerk Hill to jurors. Yes, it influenced my decision.
Right.
That is definitional prejudice. A lot of folks were looking at each other saying, well, that's it, let's go home, let's get ready for the new trial. Obviously, that didn't happen. We then heard from juror after juror who indicated no, they did not hear. Except
for the one juror who heard exactly what that first juror Z, said.
That is correct.
I thought that was really interesting that that juror verified. I mean, the verbiage was the same even.
Exact.
So, I mean, it almost corroborated what juror Z said, but...
Indeed, and that juror said that what they heard did not impact their verdict. However, they corroborated what the initial juror said, who said that it did. So you add that on the scale of new trial.
And then let's throw in the fact when Becky Hill took the stand, she said she did say that to the bailiff. And the jurors
throw that on the stack of new trial.
So, I mean, it's pretty clear to me that the defense proved that there was inappropriate contact with the jurors.
So why did she deny the motion then?
So, Juror Z, who said it affected their verdict, said when she was polled at the end of the trial, Judge Newman asked her if that was her verdict. And she said, yes, it is. That's under oath. And she referred back to that. I mean, for Chief Justice Toll, I think, her mindset is that this stuff typically happens during the trial or immediately after, and we're 9 months out, almost 10 months out. So I think, she's kind of referring back to what happened at the time of the trial.
And there was a key moment there where the affidavit of this juror, Juror Z, was introduced, where it referenced that she felt pressured and that was why she decided to vote guilty. And then obviously Creighton Waters, who's been masterful at every point of this, pointed out, well, Your Honor, if that was what caused it.
That happens in jury rooms all across the nation. That is not unusual.
And
that is
grounds,
okay.
Yes, and more importantly, not grounds for a new trial. But Jen, let me ask you this question. And we talked earlier with our Lauren Taylor from Lauren Taylor Law about some of the intricacies of the legal decisions and cases that were at play here. But I wanted to ask you about the bigger picture. There were a bunch of SLED agents in that courtroom today, weren't there?
Oh, a whole bunch of them. I think I counted 5 or 6.
Agents with the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division, the agency that investigated this case. Obviously, there's an entire table full of attorneys from the Office of South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson, who prosecuted the Murdaugh case. We didn't really talk much about them today and the role that they have played in this investigation of jury tampering. But I guess the counter argument to that, and again, we've been very critical of that process, that it was not independently conducted, but I guess the counter argument from those who believe that Justice Toll ruled correctly would be that, hey, 11 jurors said what we heard, if we heard anything. 10 of them said they didn't hear anything. And the other one that did said, well, it didn't impact it. So you only have 1 versus 11, in other words. How do you weigh that if you're making that decision?
Me personally, This is I mean, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a judge. One juror being influenced, to me, is enough. I mean, that's all it takes. I mean, in Remmer, it was one juror who had contact with somebody that was inappropriate.
And that was it. Yeah,
and that was
enough.
it. That was the case.
And in Rimmer, obviously, we talked about that presumption of prejudice, and that was something that Jim Griffin discussed at length.
Oh, I thought his closing was amazing.
He did a great job closing. He did a great job at the trial 10 months ago, as you said, and did a great job here today. But he pointed out that, look, Your Honor, we have not only proven that there was prejudice, but we have proven, one of the jurors has even said that, yes, it crossed that threshold of changing their verdict.
Right.
And as you said, it only takes one. But let's remember, with juries determining guilt or innocence, it only takes one.
Yeah.
And they had one in the egg juror who was here in town today, but did not testify. Jen, were you surprised that the egg juror was not allowed to testify?
The egg juror did not deliberate. No, I'm not.
But we heard from another juror who didn't deliberate.
We did hear from another juror who didn't deliberate, but I don't know. No, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think everything that Chief Justice Toll needed from the egg juror was in her affidavit. That's a sworn affidavit. I think she felt as though she could review that affidavit, weigh it as evidence against all the other testimony, and she did get very deep into the egg juror's dismissal with Becky Hill on the stand.
Yeah. The egg juror was discussed frequently, and so to me it was like, well, if the woman is, Dick Harpootlian said she was right across the street, let's bring her in to hear directly from her if that's...
But would that have changed anything? Because Chief Justice Toll went through the transcripts of the in-camera conference where, Judge Newman discussed with the attorneys what happened with Becky Hill was in part of it, and Judge Newman said, I am not happy with the clerk interrogating a juror. So it was...
Becky Hill had no answer for that.
She did not.
Just disastrous testimony.
And at the end, and when she was handing down her decision, she said, I have found Becky Hill not credible.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody in that courtroom found Becky Hill credible, except maybe her own attorneys. And obviously she's got some good lawyers, Justin Bamberg, Will Lewis, great attorneys. But it was interesting. We heard it wasn't so much her lawyers helping her out through this process. Obviously, we're sure they did, but the state clearly prepped this witness. And again,
Well, they didn't prep her very well. I'm not going to lie.
But the bigger point, though, is that this is someone that they are supposed to be investigating. This is someone that they have prosecutorial authority over right now, the Attorney General of South Carolina. And in fact, we have learned that the State Law Enforcement Division, the agency which is supposed to be investigating these allegations, that investigation is now currently under the state grand jury, under Alan Wilson's office. So this is, it's
all incestuous. It's a mess. That was a mess. I mean, it was an absolute mess of a day.
Yeah.
Nothing, I kind of went in thinking it was going to be very procedural and kind of dry and drag on. And the whole hearing, from the beginning where, the bailiff came in right after the first juror testified and Judge Toll swore and went out, and we found out they were watching court TV.
Yeah. That's a big thing we didn't talk about. Yeah.
One job.
Yeah. Just keep the phones out of the jury room.
Well,
let me ask you this. Doesn't that also go to the lack of credibility when it comes to the jurors saying, oh, we didn't have any of these conversations, we didn't have any of this outside influence? Well, you're sitting there with outside influence at this hearing.
It's just, I fully expect this is going to go to appeals court. I think it's going to be a very good appeal. They have a very good case to make an appeal.
How painful is this, though? If you could think of a person in the country that doesn't deserve, on a basic level, the sort of theatrics, gymnastics, contortions that we're all going to, I would say it's Alec Murdaugh. And yet, as we keep coming back to, we've got to set that aside. We've got to think about whether or not the verdict was the right verdict, and I think we both believe it was.
Yeah.
I think we both believe Alec Murdaugh.
Even Chief Justice Toll said at the end, this verdict was correct.
Yes.
I mean, it is the right verdict, but did they get there the right way? I don't think they did.
Yeah, and I think we saw today that they didn't. And frankly, once I'm with you, once you've got one juror saying, hey, this contact was made and it impacted my verdict, and then you've got another one saying, yes, they heard the same thing. And that to me was what, if I'm the judge in this case, and again, perish the thought of me ever sitting on a bench in South Carolina or anywhere else, but if I see that testimony from one juror, and then I have another juror say, yes, I heard the same thing, to me that's enough, particularly when the only person to rebut it was an absolute farce, Becky Hill. And again, I want to say this too, Jen, you and I were very close with Becky Hill. When these allegations were first made, we were in disbelief. But as this process has unfolded over the last few months, and as we watched Becky Hill in that witness box today,
It's still, still seeing her today. I haven't seen her in months, and it still kind of made my stomach drop.
We watched her lie on the stand today. We literally watched her lie on the stand today. And now we talk about, well, where does this go in an appellate process, possible perjury? But I'll tell you one thing, the agents at SLED do a lot of perjury indictments. They do a lot of perjury cases. I bet they won't go after Becky Hill for perjury.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. It'll be real interesting if they don't.
Well, and that's what bothers me the most. I don't know about you, Jen. I have a lot of respect for the way Justice Toll ran that courtroom. I don't necessarily agree with her decision, but I can't really pin any sort of institutional kind of cover up on her. But when we start looking at the way that SLED's conducted it, when we start looking at, and I understand Creighton Waters saying, oh, we are investigating this with independence and integrity. No, you're not. There's no way. And even if you were, the conflicts are still far too glaring.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I was very uncomfortable with the conflicts in the courtroom. I mean, it just felt very, I don't know what the right word is. I keep saying incestuous, but that's what it felt like. It's like the same people who jacked this up in the first place are still involved. And it's same SLED, AG's office. And
is the remedy really that difficult? Because here's what I'm worried about. I think that what we heard today, the sheer mass of testimony impeaching Becky Hill, the testimony we heard from the jurors who did allege contact, I think that the groundwork for, if not an appeal at the state level, but certainly one at the federal level, very promising. We're gonna have to do this again at some point, aren't we?
Yeah, it feels bad dragging it out, knowing, there's so many loved ones of Maggie and Paul, like, Maggie's sister and, even Buster, who, have to keep watching this play out in the legal system, and it just prolongs it. I don't know. It's a very bizarre thing to watch. This whole thing was bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I do want one point that does need to be made. When all of this first started back in September, and we were the first media outlet to report on the jury tampering allegations against Cork Hill. We've broken a lot of other news on Cork Hill, the ethics complaints against her. There are a lot of folks screamed fake news. They cried, bias. And what we heard in here today exonerated every bit of our reporting over the last few months, just as the trial, we remember back in the trial a year ago, exonerated the reporting we did.
I would be much happier reporting that the allegations against Becky Hill were completely unfounded. That would make me happier. This is hard to report.
It was gut-wrenching while she was on the stand.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good feeling. I don't enjoy seeing Alex in court again, getting unshackled. I don't, none of it's fun, but as journalists, we've got to follow the story wherever it goes. And unfortunately, it went to a place that is just uncomfortable and not pleasant.
The other thing very interesting today, at so many of these hearings in the past, Alec Murdaugh had been a focus. He comes in with his orange jumpsuit, impossible to miss. But even during the trial in his blazer and slacks, impossible to miss. All of the focus on him today.
No. I kind of kept forgetting he was in the courtroom.
Yeah, I mean, he was almost the invisible man as this drama unfolded.
I do think it was different for people watching it, not in the courtroom. just, I had a couple of people texting and saying Alex is kind of smirking, and I couldn't see that from where I was sitting. But as a participant, I kept forgetting he was in the courtroom.
Yeah, I mean, all of the arguments and all of the attention focused on those jurors, focused on Becky Hill, and then at the end, obviously focused on former Chief Justice Toll. Jen Wood, I got to ask you one last question as we look to the next steps in this drama. Obviously, we've got 4 days. The attorneys are going to be submitting language for a proposed order. Justice Toll said she will take her time to lay out that order. Where does this go from here? We're obviously an appellate process at the state level. Is it the state appeals court that's going to hear this?
State appeals court will hear it first. I'm guessing it'll eventually end up at the state Supreme Court. And there just isn't, like Chief Justice Toll said, there isn't really a case that aligns with it. There's no case like this out there. She's not seen it in her 25 years practicing law, her 35 years on the bench. She doubts anybody on the appellate court has heard it. She doubts anybody on the Supreme Court has heard it. It is unprecedented.
Well, and we know it's unprecedented because Jen Wood went digging for precedent and couldn't find it.
I looked real hard for the precedent, and it isn't there. So yeah, I do think that he has got a very good opportunity for appeal, and they're not going to rehear all of this testimony. What they are going to look at is how Chief Justice Toll chose to rule on the case. What factors she used, State versus Green, not Rummer, which I believe the defense thinks that those are the inappropriate standards to use. I do tend to agree with them.
Yeah. I thought Jim Griffin's closing argument, tying Rimmer in, tying in what his perception of or his impression, his view of the Green ruling. I thought it was masterful. But again, also Creighton Waters, I mean, give him credit. He had a tough row to hoe, and he came in with I thought a very effective argument, talking about how 11 jurors spoke with a clear, unequivocal voice. He was back in that form from the trial when he was delivering such stern arguments in the court. Just quick on his feet, just a great lawyer. Also, one thing we do want to point out, Justice Toll at the end of these proceedings praised all the lawyers for the thoroughness, the depth of their briefs, the compelling arguments that they put forward.
They were some of the finest briefs she's read in her career. And they were, because I read those briefs like a book. I mean, they usually kind of skim through them. And those were briefs that I read from start to finish, and every bit of it was fascinating. And I looked up the case law they were referencing to, see how they were applying it. She was absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Well, folks, that is a wrap from here outside the Richland County Courthouse. Research Director Jen Wood and I, we will be back in the studios in our offices here in Columbia very soon to bring you more coverage, more analysis of this case. But once again, FITSNews.com. We've been the very tip of the spear on this story from the beginning, bringing you analysis of what happens, our best assessment, our best conception of it. We will continue to do that. And at every step of the way, Jen, we will also continue to hold those accountable who we believe have stepped out of line. So keep it tuned to FITSNews.com for the very latest.